So again, the first then stage in determining a role for Islam in America is for Muslims to fairly and properly assess America. And in this regard, one of the most important features of this process of assessment is one that goes back to the very early stages in the history of Islam, following the death of the Prophet. This process of assessing American reality must be very careful in not equating non-Muslim with un-Islamic. That is to say, Muslims must avoid the fallacy of taking provenance to be fully dispositive in terms of what the value, what the legitimacy of various and sundry aspects of American society happen to be. Let me try and concretize this a bit. In his book, Conversion to Islam in the Medieval Period, Columbia professor Richard Bullitt points out that the central lands of Islam in what is now called the Middle East were not overwhelmingly Muslim for about 3 to 4 centuries after the initial conquests. That is to say that Muslims lived in places like Egypt, Syria, Iraq, even Iran and Transoxania, as numerical minorities. And what they ended up doing is assessing the realities that existed in those societies and comparing them with the transcendent values of Islam, and then reinscribing many of those as Islamic institutions. In other words, everything that came to constitute a marker of Muslim civilization, or you might even want to call it Islamic civilization, was not the spontaneous cultural or intellectual product of Muslims per se. Much of it came from non-Muslim lands, which Muslims were able to reprocess and accept as authentically Islamic. And I think this is precisely a part of the process that has to be undergone here in America. In other words, we cannot engage in the blind sort of approach that says that if it's American, it cannot be Islamic. Or if it's American, it must be Islamic. We must assess it in light of a prism that is grounded in the scriptures and the tradition of Islam.